Trevis and Emma, great to see you. This is the first of a series of writers' webinars that we're planning over the next few months. Just let people know, our next one actually is going to be on the 30th of April. It's called The Art of Storytelling. And it's a really interesting one that I would really recommend for people. I'll be putting up details about that, so keep an idea in our socials. But first tonight, our first one, I'm delighted to say, we've Emma Rogan and Trevis Gleason. And first of all, I want to congratulate you on your book. I think you're just back from a book tour in America. The book is Living Well with MS. So that must have been great. Very exciting, I'd say, now to get it out, is it?
It was indeed. It was one of those projects that we started. We didn't do sourdough starters. We started a book during the COVID and put it together, and it was great, good crack to launch it over on the West Coast in America. And Emma came over for part of that, and it was great to see a lot of old friends and a lot of new faces in the MS world, and we got to work with the National MS Society over there, as well as a couple of the MS centers. So it was good crack, but it was also a load of work that I think both of us are still recovering from. But Fergal, thank you very much and to MS Ireland for having us on. We're excited to be here.
So just to let people know that at the bottom you'll notice there's Q&A and chat. So if we would like you to send in questions throughout this talk, and I'll be having a look at them during the talk, and I'll be asking for Trevis them about anything. And so just put it into the Q&A rather than the chat if that's possible. Um, just to let people know, it's actually the 10th anniversary as well for the MSME blog, and that's kind of where it started. I know you started before that yourself, Travis, but first of all, again, congratulations on that. Am I right in thinking it's the longest running medical blog in the world? Is that possible?
The Life with MS is, yeah, we've been doing
Okay.
that for nearly 2 decades now, I
Wow.
suppose it is. But Emma was there at the beginning of MS and me with MS in Ireland. To my knowledge, it's the longest running of the patient organization blogs about MS in the world. Am I correct on that one, Emma?
Yeah, that's as far as I know. And just remembering the early days of contacting all the first writers, that sort of first batch of people. And yeah, it's 10 years. It's surprising that it is, yeah, it's in a blink of an eye, but it's lovely to go back on what Travis was saying about visiting his hometown of Seattle and meeting his friends there when we were over, and combining that with the 10 years of the blog. It's just been brilliant. It's been really good to mark important things that have happened with MS Ireland, but also with I suppose patient engagement, let's say, and people writing about what's going on for them. I think it's been a huge decade for us all, really.
Maybe that's one of the beautiful things of doing blogs over that period. Something that you wrote actually in the book and at the end was saying about how you got to know the young Trevis. And it kind for me
We
that kind
did.
of Joe was a kind of an interesting concept, through his
Yeah.
writing. But that's the beauty of writing, isn't it? That you
Mm.
get to know someone and maybe you get to know someone, the internal workings of their mind. That's the magic of it.
Absolutely, absolutely. It is the magic of it. And yeah, getting to know the young Travis, and then when I was over with him in Seattle, getting to meet some of the people he speaks about in the book and in his writing, and even to touch the same earth that he was walking on when he was younger,
Oh,
and writing
stop.
those blogs. And but it's quite poignant, but it's powerful in that as well, being able to imagine somebody else's worlds through the words that they write and the words that they communicate to us. It's transcendental. I know it's getting a little bit spiritual, a little bit woo woo, but it can be a huge adventure, really, writing.
Yeah. And
And
just
Fergal, one of the things
Mhm.
that I think it's important to understand is that MS Ireland wasn't the only organization to begin, the only MS society to begin a patient's blog. The National MS Society in America did it, and I wrote for that for a while. And the MS Society of the UK had one, and I know a number of others. But to keep something going for 10 years, and I believe, Emma, you can correct me, we're on sort of our third cadre of bloggers. Some have stopped and come back,
Mm,
some have just left, some have stayed on the whole time. But to be able to maintain 10 straight years, no other society's been able to do that, just because there gets to be a level of burnout. And that's something that I think anyone who's written, be it for newspapers or for work or whatever, you start to know that, geez, I'm getting a little tired. And to be able to, I won't say that Emerson and Me has reinvented itself over the years, but it's certainly rejuvenated itself over and over. And I'm really
mm.
excited to see where it goes under the leadership of the new editorial team, as well as Emma and I have sort of stepped aside from those roles. After a decade, we figured it was time for fresher voices to take over the lead there.
And you always see it from our website. It's always one of the most popular things every week when that blog comes out and on social media. And I think people get to know the bloggers, and that's what makes it special. As I said, you saying about getting to know Trevis even now after 10 years, looking back at earlier writing. But isn't that the beauty of doing those blogs? Is not only are you getting to know the writers or other people, but when you're doing the blogs or writing yourself, you get to know yourself as well, don't you?
Mm, you absolutely do. And if you have the opportunity to look back, and certainly blogs are one way you can do that, you see how your own writing style can change. One of the things that people might notice in the book is that while it appears that I'm quite the world traveler, because my editor asked that I put the date and the location where I had written these pieces originally, and Emma and I had edited them pretty hard, but the tone, even the language that I use writing in Ireland versus writing in America, or some of the other experiences that I've had around the world, it really does change your tone, and your writing changes as you go along.
So tell me about the start of the blog then. How did that happen, the MSME blog?
Well, Emma's just looks like she
Yeah,
stepped away there for a moment, but
it could just be connection, but I think she'll be back in
could
a
be.
second.
But from my recollection,
There you are.
go ahead, Emma. You start, because you were there before it was a thing.
Yeah, it was. There was I suppose when you think about 10 years ago and what was going on with internet and blogging was a big thing. We didn't, that was how people were engaging with the world around them, I suppose. And one of the Tara Donahue is somebody who used to work with MS Ireland, and she was instrumental with Trevis and myself, and Diana Carthy is here as well. Getting the call out for people to write in, to submit a piece and to get interest. And I remember having those first phone calls with people, about who they were and what county they were in, and I suppose their background and what was going on for them. And it was over a number of weeks and months that I think there was a call for writers also in the MS News. But it's really, I learned a lot about engaging with people. I worked with people before in different roles, in different jobs, but it was certainly how to encourage people to write from a very personal on a very personal topic, but also from a very personal place in themselves. And it's a big deal to expose yourself to uh, critique, in the outside world, and also to write so personally about what's going on for you. So those were the early days. I think it might be nearly 4 groups, Trevis, of people over the years, of writers.
MS Cognition, I'll go with your answer.
Yeah, it has, like, there have been many people involved in the MS and Me blog, and one of, it's a real privilege. It's a real privilege to work with somebody on a piece, to bring it from something that is maybe a little bit disconnected, and to bring it into something that's beautifully formed and ready to go out into the world. So for me as an editor, that has been one of the joys of being part of that whole process, seeing how people grow and seeing how people develop their voices and seeing how people yeah, just really start to relish writing, and they get really good at it. People get really good when they're encouraged to find their voice and then write from that voice and to share it with the world.
Like, I think there's going to be a lot of people like listening to this or watching this that, maybe think they have it within them, but maybe have never written or haven't written anything since school. And to do that step, like that's the hard part, isn't it? Actually, that start step. How did you find that at the very start, yourselves as writers? Like, I'm sure the fact that people are listening, I'm sure they might have written something or they maybe even written anything. But to get that part where you go, oh, I actually could write, how do you get past that?
Fergal, I'll even take it one step beyond that. When you talk, some people haven't written since school. I'm one of those people that really loved writing, and I was told by a writing teacher at school that I would never be a writer. So, for 20 years, I believed that, or 15 years or something, because, all right, well, that's something I can't do. I loved it, but I could, and I thought I was good at it. But then I realized it was just that one teacher. And even though
Sorry, I have to interrupt. Like, some people can really, and that is part of the problem, is some people can be so mean and so hurtful. They can pause us in our right, but
they
really,
still can be, Emma. You should see the rejection
oh,
letters
I
that I
know,
got for
I know,
different
I get
books.
it, I get it, I get it, I know. But to be so mean on a young person, excuse me, Trevis.
No, that's all right.
I feel sad for that young Trevis.
Well,
Yeah.
the good part was that he did get his head around it. There was a couple of years earlier in a composition class, I wrote a short story, and it was happened to be the department head of the English department that was my teacher, and she gave it an A+ grade and said it was one of the best things she's ever written from a school student, and I should enter it in a writing contest, etc. So 2 years later, when I was in this creative writing test class that I just couldn't get a grade, I took that old story, polished it up with the recommendations of the English head, and submitted it, and I got a D+ on it. So I knew that it wasn't me in my writing, it was her. But it still stung enough that I just backed off the whole idea.
But that's the point, you see. That's what I'm saying, is that it's you're giving so much of yourself, and that's the part where I'm trying to figure out how do you get people to get past that, because they could have experienced that. I experienced that in school as well. I remember
I would say that the thing to do is that you are giving the gift of writing to yourself.
yeah,
Begin by writing for yourself,
Mhm.
or maybe for your
Mhm.
progeny. Maybe start writing stories about your childhood or whatever for your children or your grandchildren, etc. Start by something that is very personal, but only write it for yourself. Then you get the satisfaction. The first manuscript I ever wrote never got published, thank God, because it was awful. But there would be times where I was sitting down and I might only get, 50, 150 words out in a day, but there would be times that sentence would come out and I'd read it over and over, and I'd read it aloud because it felt good in your mouth to say, and and hear it said. So you got to begin by writing for yourself and
Mhm.
creating the joy within yourself, so that when you get into the process that Emma was talking about with editors, etc., because everything needs to be edited always, and nearly everything will need to be changed in some way. So you get to the point where you will realize that you have to be happy with it when you put the bow in it and you send it to an editor, knowing that it needs to be, the word I use is commercialized. It needs to be changed up so that it fits a format, be that a book or a blog or a newspaper article or whatever. But you have to be happy with it when you send it in, understanding that it will be changed. We had a discussion in one of the bloggers meetings one time about the editing process, and people were feeling a little bit offended with the editing. I was like, and this was when my memoir, Chef Interrupted, was about to be published in Ireland after it had been in America and won an international writing competition for World Cookbook Awards as the best culinary memoir and all this, and it was being edited again. And I said, lads, this is my own story. This is and this is the 8th time it's being edited. You just have to understand that that's part of the work. But the joy is in creating those few moments and then stringing those few moments into sentences, into paragraphs, and into pages.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to, there's two questions come in. One is from Nadia, our new MSME blog editor, and she said, did you send a copy to your teacher of the new book? I was wondering that myself, actually.
You know, the very first book I wrote, Chef Interrupted, I considered it, but then I thought, you know, why would I give her that sort of satisfaction or whatever? I don't, and I'm not trying to be insert the expletive here, but I really don't care anymore. You know, she did her damage. There's no need for me to give her any of that energy anymore.
And this is another one from here from Daniel. I think it's a really interesting one, actually. It says, how might someone living with RRMS reflect on experiences with MS when their own current DMT is effective? The experience feels almost insincere compared to others, especially if they will share with others via blog. So I presume they're saying they're feeling okay now. That's really, you know, they're reflecting back. What do you think of that? What would you say to that?
Just when I was listening to what Trevis was saying and your question, and Daniel's question, is it Daniel?
Yeah.
Thinking about the process, and you're asking about how do you get started and how do you, you know, and really for a lot of people who are perhaps newly diagnosed, writing in a notebook or writing in a journal in the early days, particularly to try and process for themselves the difficult news, to try and process their emotions, to try and deal with what's going on for them. It can be a very private affair, and then you might bring it out into the world. But is Daniel asking, you know, is he saying that he's doing well, so he doesn't, it's not a misreaction, Daniel.
Yeah.
We still want to hear your voice. You know what I mean? And your voice is important. And you know, we all have opinions, and opinions are graded differently, you know, that education and experience and all of those different things. So but I would encourage you, Daniel, to write for yourself, and there may come a day when you write for others, but what's going on for you is really important to you. And you're the person living with your condition and living with your symptoms, and they are not more or less. And comparing yourself to others, it's a path of, it's a lonely, devastating path to go down. You know, comparison is the thief of joy, as they say. And really, I'm really glad to hear, Daniel, that you're doing well, you know, and keep going, and keep, you know, if you choose to write about it, you know, for yourself or for others, do it. It's not about what other people are writing about. It's about what
And I
you
think,
write about.
Emma, would you agree with me that you know, there are so many more people living with multiple sclerosis that are diagnosed either younger or earlier in the stage of the disease? The DMTs are so much more powerful and effective. So there are a lot more people who are living that same experience as Daniel is. So they're in that good place right now.
That's
So that is an
great.
authentic experience, and that's wonderful.
Mm.
That being said, you know, there's the stories of how, you know, from diagnosis and getting to that point where you're doing well. There's that niggly little voice that might still be in the back of their head with, you know, what if things are good now, but what's tomorrow?
Mm.
So those are all authentic experiences, and
Mm-hmm.
there's nothing that diminishes that as a true and probably now quite popular MS experience. Please God, that more people are in that place, and there's nothing inauthentic about sharing all of that, the good, the bad,
Mm-hmm.
and the smelly.
And also,
Yeah.
you know, but there's no standardized person with MS too, so that's
There's no
important.
standardized human. There is no standardized,
Exactly.
there's no normal, you
Yeah.
know, and I think it is kind of peeling back the layer of sophistry, you know, of pretense that everything is like this, or everything's really bad, so therefore I can write about it, or everything is too good, so I can't write about it.
Yeah.
Actually, because of who you are, you can write about you.
But
You
also,
know, I know that doing it for so long, I just did the maths. It's just over 18 years that I've been doing the Life with MS blog. There are times that, some of the pieces that I've written that are the best received. I call them that they're the parts about the living part of living with MS, not the MS part, where I might just, put aside the MS parts of it and just write about the glories of a day and how the weather and my symptoms seemed to sync up, and it was a good day for that. And those are very popular blogs and pieces that I've posted around, because it doesn't all have to be doom and gloom. And our experience is from the time that we, wake up at 4 o'clock to pee until the alarm goes off, and then we get up and we do our day and until we go to bed. That's an experience of humanity, of life, and in our case, of life with multiple sclerosis.
Like some of the blogs that you did celebrating the 10th anniversary, we're looking back on previous blogs and how things had changed. And that's the beauty of writing. You can look back at different periods. You said, especially about journaling, you can look back at different periods and how you were and how you are now. Isn't it?
Yeah, and that richness, that there's great treasure in that, in being able to look back, having, perhaps you're writing maybe 5 minutes a day, or being able to look back at what you have written, 10 years hence or years hence, and how things have changed for you. And sometimes, or for me, I find that writing things down, it gives me it's almost like a roadmap for the next, say, 6 months. And I can maybe track my progress, whatever I'm choosing to do, or, trying to move things out or move things in. Writing is a great way of marking time.
In fact, do you remember, I don't know if it was big here, back in the 80s, perhaps, Ken Burns' first major documentary series came out called The Civil War in America, and it really changed the way that documentaries were done. And he used a lot of handwritten letters during the American Civil War, back and forth between soldiers and parents and lovers and soldiers to commanders, etc. And that's actually, for that year for Christmas, I asked for a fountain pen, because it was just the beauty of words. And what people were laying down, they mayn't have known it, but they were laying down a written history of their lives and their times. So I think back to my great-grandparents and going fishing with my great-grandfather and hearing some of the little snippets I still remember. And we all say of those who have generations past, geez, I wish I had time to sit down and ask more questions, and I wish I knew more. So again, what we're doing by writing, be it journaling or writing articles or blogs or books or whatever, is you're laying down a bit of your own history or a bit of your own fun. There's no reason that we can't talk about fiction writing as well, or semi-fiction. Some people would call my memoir a bit of semi-fiction, and I wouldn't disagree with them. But yeah, you're laying down a bit of history for yourself. It's like, when you find one of those old journals or an old school annual or something like that, and you're seeing the pictures or the things you've written, it brings you back, but also it gives the future generations, progeny, something to look back on our life and our times, and see what it was like. And if you've ever stumbled, I was at a wedding last week, and an officiant read one of the love letters from a grandfather to the grandmother 2 weeks before they were to be married. It was brilliant, and you don't get that if you don't write.
That's true, isn't it? So like the actual process, why write as a matter of interest? Like, just say what made ye, both of ye, actually start the process, starting those blogs?
I'll let you start, Emma.
Um, a little bit of persuasion. Everyone else was doing it, so why can't I, kind of thing. And I do love, I love language. I love grammar. I'm total grammar geek, and as you know, Fergal. So, and to make myself better, because I think it helped me refine my thinking in a way, and communication as well, from my heart and my mind to other people, and to see if what I was writing and what I was thinking, and to see how it was received. You know, I don't write so much for public consumption anymore. I'm more of a journaler now, you
Why is
know.
that? Why are you not letting it out in the world?
I've been burned a few times with social media, and been experiencing some things personally that I don't want people to know what I'm thinking necessarily, or what I'm going through. And to go back on what Daniel was asking, I've been experiencing really, really difficult symptoms, and um my way of processing that is writing for myself. So I would be more editing and compiling, as Trevis would know, the work I've done with Trevis. So back to what I was saying about being, being vulnerable, or I
Mm.
didn't use the word vulnerable, but at the moment, I find it's too raw for me to be so vulnerable.
Okay, because that's something I get when I read the blogs every week, and
Mm.
Travis, I was reading your book as well. It's so you're so vulnerable. Every week I read those blogs, and they're so emotional because the person gives so much of themselves.
Mm.
So that is hard, I would say, is it? Or is it cathartic as well? Do you like what do you get like after that? Is it especially when you sit out in the world and people tell you what it means? Because Travis, I've heard you saying that doing your blogs, that's you do it for other people, for what people get it when people over the last 20 years, people have come to you. I know, people come up to you and at things and told you what they've got out of it, and that's sort
Oh,
of
it's an
makes it
amazing reward,
special.
but I would say the number one thing, um, paraphrasing, is I thought I was the only one. So many of us live in these little MS silos of our own, and we mayn't know others with the disease. We may feel isolated. We may have been isolated by losing jobs or family and friends kind of pulling back or whatever. So for someone to put out, even if it's not terribly raw, just sort of something of an experience and something of an oddity, and then I have the capability, through members in a lot of journals, etc., to go and do a bit of research and see that yes, it's an MS thing, and this is how the physiology of it works, and why it's like this, and what might mitigate it, what mightn't. So to hear from someone, oh, I thought I was the only one, or wow, now I feel normal in my abnormality, that kind of thing. That's an amazing reward. And like I said before, putting something out there that I thought was something of a throwaway, that I thought was something very, personal. Uh, Good Lord, it took me a year to write about the passing of my service dog, Sadie, and the outpouring, not just from people with MS, they were sharing it, and other people who had lost their dogs were getting in touch. And it was, it was difficult because I was reliving that. In fact, finally a year after when I was writing it, I was writing it through tears. But there is a catharsis there, and there is a celebration of community, in the good and in the difficult.
Mm.
So when you start writing, I'm curious about for both of you, do you start with a blank page, or do you put some notes on a page first, or how do
So I'm waving around a Ticonderoga number 3 here, or number
you
2. That used to be how I started out, with a legal pad of paper and a pencil, and I would write, and then I would go back through that, and I would try to figure out what the hell it was that I scribbled down, because my handwriting has gotten worse, and it wasn't from a good place that it started going downhill with MS. So that when I finally did type it in, I had a pretty good first draft because I was having to edit what I had read already. And then once I got that onto a computer screen, then I would let it lay down for a while, you know, a day or two before I would go back and revisit it. That was how I started. And those first blogs, and I got started sort of because an editor asked me if I would be interested in writing a blog, and I said, sure, what's a blog? But that's how I started. And it would take me hours because I'd go and research and I'd rewrite it and I'd rewrite the rewriting, and then I would question myself and I'd crumple the whole thing out and start again. But now, if I'm stuck for a topic or whatever, I'll walk the dogs, or I'll, you know, take a shower or something and just let the mind percolate. When I was writing my first book, I showed Emma a little kebab house that I used to walk to from my house if I was really stuck, and I would say I was walking the book, and I'd go get a shawarma salad, and then I'd walk home, and I'd be able to pick back up. So that's how I started. But it was all about sitting down and writing. The first 8 or 10 years of it, maybe 8 years, I was writing 500 to 700 words 3 times a week for the organization that eventually became Everyday Health. So it's one of those things that repetition, just getting those muscles working. And that's when Emma and I were working on the book, and I was trying to encourage her to start writing, and I said, okay, well, next week when we talk, I want 50 words on, you know, spinach, whatever it is, just to get in the habit of writing or storytelling. I had an old girlfriend, a dear one to me, that we would lay in bed, and she would give me a word, and I'd take a couple of minutes and I'd tell her a story about it, either fiction or part fiction or whatever. And it was just getting the mind working, because, and by God, the Irish are better at it than anybody in the world, I think. I talk about this a lot when I'm on tour, is that, you know, the Irish word for accent is blas, which really means taste. I mean, the taste for words is something that the Irish people have in spades.
You think we're special? Yeah, great, like to hear that. Jake?
No, I know we have an international audience, so I'm not trying to put anyone out there.
So, and what about yourself, Emma? What do you do? Do you start with a blank page, or how does it work?
I read a lot. I read a huge amount, and as I'm reading and also listening, I would be compiling. If I'm writing a piece, that's what I would do. Otherwise, with journaling, I would just free write. And I love poetry, so I would be working things in that way, how a sentence will look and how it's constructed. I will read it out to hear it as well as read it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I want to know what it sounds like when I read it as well. So my process would not be as refined as Trevis, but it would be very different. It would be more I suppose more like poetry, if that makes sense.
Those, yeah.
You
You're
know,
more poetry than prose, huh?
more poetry than prose, and but trying to make, you know, even to build it into the paragraph, that how it sounds is important to me. So there's a couple of nuances in it that perhaps that's why I don't write as much as Travis. You know, it's like
Emma, you said something
pedantic
important there. That in order, my background is as a culinarian. I'm a chef by training, a food scientist by education, and to be a good cook, you have to eat other people's food. You have to see what's going on out there. You have to taste other people's flavors, etc. And it's the very same thing with writing. As you said, you need to read, you need to hear other people's words and phrases. And it can get you excited. Now, when I'm writing, when I'm in the middle of a writing project, a book in particular, I can't read. I can't read anyone else's stuff, because a bit of imposter syndrome sets in, and I think, oh my God, I'll never be that good. That's, that's unattainable. And then I get worried about other people's voices and meters coming into my writing. So I am careful there. So one of my favorite things is, after I send the book off to a publisher, and we're in between that, it's off, and then I'm getting the galley copies back from the editor. I just read voraciously, because for the year or 2 or 3 or whatever it takes to write a book, I kind of have to not read. So I'm depriving myself of one of the great joys, and maybe that's one of the things that will help me write faster in the future, perhaps.
What is that like when you get the book back, the first copies of it in the post?
Well, now, fortunately, and unfortunately, so I have always, again, that imposter syndrome, I have always employed a professional editor on my own before I even start sending it off to publishers, etc. So it's in a good place. Um, and the editor that I used was very well respected. She was actually a publisher and then a publishing editor and then a commissioning publisher for a number of very large publishers internationally. Um, the very sad and unfortunate part is in between this book being edited and it being published. My dear Cheryl passed away, so she was a fierce advocate for all of my projects. So I will miss her dearly, and all of us will miss the work that she certainly made me read better than I write. Yeah, so I always did that. I always employed someone who I trusted and I could work with. And then I also, that gave me a little bit of strength to push back on the things that were really important to me. And she would say, okay, it's your book. This is just why I'm saying things, and I might acquiesce there as well. But as Emma was saying, sometimes you can get so very precious with something that someone is going to skim over in a tenth of a second to get through those 3 or 4 words. So you do have to be a little bit thick-skinned, and certainly blogging in an atmosphere that has comments on it can thicken one's skin a little bit. Certainly anybody on social media knows how thick one's skin needs to be. I am excited to know that the comments function is back on the MS and Me blog now, so that people can read and comment. And then what's really exciting to me as a writer and blogger is when people begin to comment back and forth to each other, because now you're not just a group of readers, you become a community. And I think that the MS and Me blog community is ready to come back together into that form.
Exactly, and that's on the website. So when people go to the blogs and the website, there's a comments below, and anyone can leave comments. So, yeah, that'd be a great thing to get that interaction going. And you just mentioned about Julie here. Just asked about finding beta readers and an editor. Where would you start looking? So,
There are guilds of writers. It depends on what you're writing about, etc. There are an awful lot of people who think they're better editors than they are. One of the things that I find really helpful, and I don't know if this is the same for Emma, but find a writer that you like, that you respect, and then read their acknowledgments at the back of the book. Find out who their editors might have been, who their agents might have been, who the people that helped them along the process. And some of those people are for hire.
yeah. And just another question, Sandra asked, how critical do you need to be at formatting a manuscript to submit to an editor? So you kind of answered it in one way. You talked about giving it to an editor before the editor.
Yeah, you need to be happy with it when you hand it to an editor. Now, if you're at a place where you're not quite sure of the direction it needs to go, etc., the woman who published this book actually was a publishing consultant, a writing consultant that I hired when I was 3/4 of the way through of that first book I was talking about, the first manuscript that was just absolute shite. And she told me, Trevis, you've got a book in you, but this isn't the one you should be writing. So help me along that way. So there are consultants, and I know, for instance, the woman who was my publishing editor at O'Brien Press, or at Collins Press, for the book Dingle Dinners. She has gone out after Collins Press sort of folded out upon retirement, and she has her own consulting company here in Ireland doing that. And so there are people that are out there.
So there's one here from Francis saying, are there basic methods and conventions? This is very long, but basically, I do think that a lot of people that are be listening in today probably maybe are interested in writing but haven't written before. So this sort of adds up to that. Like, are there basic methods? This one, the elements of style.
Yeah, this was given to me. It was a textbook back in culinary school, before university even. This is the 3rd edition. God only knows how many editions it is. But that's by Skunk and White, as in the E.B. White, a famous author. So yeah, that's a good place to start. Emma, as an editor, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think there are a number of different style guides that, people aren't at that point of ready to write. Back to what we've been saying, you need to read good writing to become a good writer in a way as well, to find your own voice. But to read the style guides and to read good writers and keep writing. I hear this from Trevis a lot. You have to be a writer, you have to write and keep writing and keep practicing it. And in whatever, in your journal, whether it's a blog, whether it's a notebook that you keep on your laptop, but read other people's writing. Because none of us are good at the start. And back to having a thick skin. When we were going through that process, Trevis, some of the stuff that's coming back, I grew a couple of extra layers, but I was a little bit raw with some of the feedback.
And this is coming from the publisher after it had already been
Yeah,
edited,
exactly.
Fergal. So
Exactly.
it can get kind of
Your ego,
harsh.
your ego is, it's good it gets a bit of a kicking, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't think it's a bad thing. But it's, you're scraping back all the superficial stuff, and a couple of other people's sets of eyes are going to look at it with a critical view, and they're going to peel things away, and it's not going to feel very nice, but you will be better for it.
Is there, I mean, this is a tough question, but is there a particular book that you would recommend for yourself that you got, you said about reading, particularly to do with sort of to writing about yourself and maybe particularly writing about your MS? Is there a certain book that you read that you kind of is an inspiration?
There
I
wasn't
hate
for
that
me.
more.
Sorry. I wish there's an old saying that a friend of mine had: 3 moves is as good as a fire. And I've moved a lot in my life. And my agent, when we first started this process, she's Stephen King's former agent. So I trust her implicitly. And during the process, at the very beginning of the first book, she sent me a book that was a compilation of rejection letters from throughout history. I mean, there was one that Joyce got, there were some that Stephen King got, there was one that J.K. Rowling got, and all these well-known, published, famous authors. And it seemed that not a single publisher could just say, you know what, that's not for us right now. They had to just, make themselves feel good by making the writer feel awful. And these are writers that became very successful. I can't remember the name of it. I can't put my hands to it, but that was very helpful, not for the writing part, but for the stealing myself for what was to come.
There is it's a grammar book. It's grammar and it's about writing and editing. It's called STET, STET, and it's it's an editing term. I can't remember who wrote it, but it's a fantastic book if you can get your hands on it. And as for finding, there is no one book that I could recommend, but back to the whole thing of, for me, I read poets, I read what I consider good poetry, and I am old-fashioned in what I read as well. But I also read zombie novels. I love fantasy and stuff. So, it's finding encouragement wherever you can. And
I
for me,
suppose,
I find it in lots of different places.
sorry, Emma, didn't mean to cut across. I suppose if we're talking about specifically about writing about living with multiple sclerosis, there are scores of well-respected blogs out there. There's MS and Me. There's even some of the older stuff from the National MS Society, the Connections blog, and the MS Society of the UK. And then you know, some of our MS&Me bloggers have their own blogs, and then just go out there looking and just start reading. And when I've moved to different cities, I always try to read the newspapers to find, you know, what restaurant critic and what film critic I might share a palette with. And then I'll know to follow them. If a new restaurant opens and this person likes or doesn't like it, well, I've liked what he or she has liked or disliked along the way. So that might be a good thing, is to go out there and just start reading other people's experiences with MS, because everyone writes from, as I've put it sometimes, you know, we all look at life through a lens, and the lens rag that I polish my lens with is multiple sclerosis, and every day it changes, and so I polish my lens with that. And everyone looks at the world, you know, we're our own directors of our own films, we're our own script writers. So you're going to be reading a different style, and you sort of incorporate, you know, I like a little of this, a little of that, and a little of this, and all of a sudden, you know, it's cafeteria reading, I suppose.
Emma, you know, when a new blogger is starting, is there any tips that you would give them, you know, for they're starting their first blog? What tips do you say, like, about how to write, or is it on is it topics, or what is it? What do you tell them?
Well, with the process that we have used in the past, we would people would be given topics, and in say for instance, people would be given topics, and I remember a couple of writers you know, they would write a piece, and they would send it in to me, I'd review it, and we'd have a conversation back and forth, you know, about refining certain things and pulling out, you know, deleting parts of them, but also reworking the piece. So you are going to work, like the editorial team now with the MS&Me blog, Nadia and Rosie, and you know, it's about their bloggers working with them and them working together to have their voice come out, you know. So it's really important that the people are supportive of the writers, you know, and that the writers know that they're being supported by the editorial team. So that is one of the special things about the MS&Me blog. I always I believed I had a duty of care to the people who were being so vulnerable, who were being so generous with their time and also with their human experience to share it with the world. So for me, it was very much about not mollycoddling people at all. We're all grown-ups, but encouraging people in ways that would make sure that they were willing to continue to write and willing to continue to bring out the specialness of their story.
We should have, Trevis, if there's one tip, if there's one thing that you could tell someone here that is thinking about their first bit of writing, what tip would that be? Can only be one.
Yeah, it's you're not allowed a big long answer like me.
No, I'm just
I heard that, Virgo.
I'm just looking at that clock.
So what I would say is to every day pick a new word, or have someone in the house pick a word for you. And by the end of the day, have 50 words written about that word. And you know, and it could be very roundabout how you get there, or whatever, but it's just an exercise of getting and sitting down and thinking first, well, how can I tell a story? Maybe it's my experience with that, or whatever it is, but give yourself a word every day, or if you need a sentence or a topic. But I like just the single word, because you have to get really creative and you have to think about it, and then sit down and write 50 or 100 words, whatever. Set a thing, a limit for yourself, or a minimum, and then write to that. And then if you really want to take it to the next place, then write to that exact number of words, because there are a lot of places where when they say they want 750 words, they don't want 749 words, and they don't want 751 words. So that's the next step of that. But I would say, if you want to start writing, but do it with a purpose, to a word, and to a word count every day.
And just a question has come in here from Julia saying about converting speech to text. Have you ever used any of that software? She said sometimes she gets tired.
Have you heard my accent? Dragon 123
Yeah,
doesn't do me.
I saw that. I saw that question. I'd like to respond to Julie. Julie, one of the things that I use, sometimes again, dexterity is a problem for me, is the note function on my iPhone. I use that. There's an option to speak your note. So
Wow,
that's what I would use sometimes. I'm not sure if she's ever used that.
brilliant.
So
I didn't
I'm
know
sure
that
it's the
was.
same on Android as well. So quite often, you don't have your laptop with you or you don't have a notepad with you. So I would use I think you just click on the mic. There's a mic that you click on, and as you speak, it types out your notes for you.
And there's loads of even actually we're using Zoom. Zoom now have an option for like converting voice to text. So an awful lot of those applications now actually do that. There is that software. So
Yeah.
there's actually a lot of those options. So just with the book Living Well with MS, actually, we didn't really actually, just in case people don't know what the book is, could you tell us about the book? What is it?
Emma, I'll let you tell.
It is a book I wish I had when I was first diagnosed, I'll be honest. I think it's back to not be it's about connecting with somebody else. Some of the stories that Trevis tells are very relatable, even though he's a boy, he's American. There were many things that I could relate to. And it's something I've heard from a lot of people, and people I've given the book to, they have said how they understood, these are people without MS, they've understood what was going on for their friends or their family better from reading the book. So it's really useful to give to friends or family members who are wanting to know more about MS, and you don't necessarily want to have to get into your own personal experience with it.
It's a collection of essays spanning roughly 20 years, so it
Yeah,
covers a lot.
16, 18 years, something like that. Yeah. And it was they were never written linearly,
Yeah.
from, this is MS and this is my diagnosis and this is, the aha moment and all that. But with Emma's help, we compiled it that way into, the early years and friends and family and falling off the wagon and the difficult parts and the unspeakable bits. And then we've got a couple of appendices. And before there was anything called crowdsourcing, what I had done, I think it was 10 years into the blog, Life with MS, and I put out there the 12 things I'd learned in 10 years. And one of them was that someone should write an MS symptom thesaurus. And I thought, that's actually a really good idea. So every month I would put out a symptom and I would write about it and maybe put into words a paragraph of my experiences with that symptom. And then we would get hundreds, sometimes thousands of responses back, and people saying, "Oh, that's one. I'll use that with my neurologist next time," or "This is my experience," etc. So what we did was we went back through those comments as well and compiled all those. So one of the appendices is a series of most of the MS symptoms and a paragraph of different words to describe those symptoms. Pain can be sizzling or poking or stabbing or dull or sharp, or as someone put it, one that I have never had because I've never had anything waxed, but they said it's like waxing a nerve, and I knew exactly what that meant. And the number of people who are taking that in with them to their appointments with their GPs and their neurologist, or when they're trying to describe their fatigue to their family members, they're using that as well. It's one of those books I hope that people will enjoy, and then they can put on the shelf and then pull back off the shelf and say, "Oh, you know what? That's I need to read that again." And it is available for people who prefer larger text. It is available on ebook form, and if you're willing to listen to this accent for 30 some hours, it is available on audiobook as well.
Can I just ask you about that? I'm sure there's loads of people here that are people talked about writing books and stuff. I'm always intrigued with the whole process. What's that like actually recording an audiobook?
Absolutely terrifying.
I'd say.
I First off, it was in the Brill building, which in the 50s and the 60s was the place that all the, all the music writers, the Neil Sedakis, the Carole Kings, the James Taylors were all in that building writing and pitching their songs. So there are ghosts in that building. And then you're in this tiny little booth to record, and the microphone is very sensitive. It certainly picks up, as Emma had said, you can tell that I'm very nervous when we get started because it didn't really sound like me. But at one point, the engineer was saying something along the line of, okay, listen, in 20 minutes, we'll finish this section, then we'll take a 20-minute break for lunch, and then we'll get back so we don't lose momentum. And then I started reading the next bit, and then she broke through and she said, Trevis, sorry, we could hear your stomach growling. So the microphone is that. So I would start speaking, and then I would swallow too loudly, and then that gets in your head, and then 3 words, 4 words down, you're mucking up because you're thinking that I just swallowed too loudly. So it is, for someone who loves to talk, obviously, I was nowhere near as good at it as I thought I was going to be.
Well, it sounds great. I've heard it, and it sounds great actually. So they work their magic in the studio.
Fix it in post.
And
I didn't tip that engineer enough.
just about a curiosity, if I had to, could you pick one essay blog from the book that's your favorite? And what's the first one that comes into your head? It's not even your favorite. It's what's the first one that comes into your head, both of you.
For me, I'll let you think, Emma, because it might be not quite as close to your memory. But for me, it was the 10 things I would tell someone who is newly diagnosed in their 20s. Because that's I was in my 40s, maybe even 50s when I wrote that piece, because 20 years on, the disease is so much different than it was when I was diagnosed in my 30s. And of course, one of the things that I mentioned in there is don't talk to the old people. So here I am, 50-something years old, telling the young people not to listen to me, and I'm going to tell them 8 other things to do. But that's one that sticks in my mind, because there are so many times that we get asked that, what would you tell the younger you or whatever? And that was one that I felt like I could use my experience and share it with a whole new cadre who are experiencing the disease in a wholly different way.
For me, there's one that back to getting to know Trevis a little bit better. I got to know a little bit about his sibling, and the rock in the bottom of the pond.
Yeah.
I can't remember the phrase.
It's just a big rock in the bottom of the pool.
Yeah, and it really was a very poignant. It really struck my heart, that particular piece. And I'm sure you've told your sister that as well. But it was just I think the normality of the experience of the relationships, but also how, again, back to writing, or to writing and relationships. Sometimes life can, there are the really dark times. We know that, but the nuggets of wonder and of goodness that come out of the seemingly mundane things. When we're in the dark and when we're in the rainy days, it's being able to look back on the good moments with people we love and people who love us. So that's why that piece really struck me.
Fergal, how about you? You've read the book. What, anyone strike you?
And this is terrible. Well, it's not terrible, but I'm actually just looking at it here, that the afterword that Emma that you wrote was absolutely just the word. I was just looking at it here again now. It's just beautiful. The writing was absolutely gorgeous. I think you'd agree, wouldn't you, Trevis?
I would indeed, and you can see on Emma's face the pain that that went through. God, I can't even think of how many iterations to get it to that, because so that's a perfect one to finish on, because it exemplifies just how difficult the transition from writing to getting published is. Wouldn't you say, Emma?
I would, and but it's a wonderful thing, as to get to know Trevis, to build a better relationship with him, but also to encourage other people. It really has been extraordinary.
Yeah.
Such a gift. Really, so wonderful.
And you know, one of the fun parts about this book is that we dedicated it to my wife Karen and Emma's children Thalia and Kai, with a little personal note in there that they'll understand. But that's one of the fun bits when you write the acknowledgements and you write the dedication and stuff. That's the that's the sugar on the cherry on the top
Oh,
of the
it's
cream on the top
amazing.
of the sundae.
Yeah, it's
And you know,
amazing.
for those people now, there's going to be people there that are listening, and you know, that little magic thing. Like you've got so much in your lives from writing. So, is there just something that you could say to those people to encourage them to actually take up that pen or pencil or keyboard and start writing? Emma?
Uh, well, what do you have to lose? But also, it's now or never, you know? It's a woman said to me when I was sort of pulling my hair out about the children in the shopping center, she said the days are long, but the years are short. You know, it's kind of you do it now. You do it now, and you will look back in a couple of years' time and you'll be really, really glad you started today or tomorrow. You know, just get started.
And the final word to you, Travis?
You just invested an hour of a beautiful spring evening to sit here and listen to the two
Yeah.
of us talk about writing. You've already made the first step. You may be writing already. If you are,
Yeah.
keep going. And if you're not, you were willing to hear about it for an hour. So what the hell are you waiting for?
Yeah.
Lovely.
Everybody wants to hear from you.
They
So
do.
listen, thank you so much for your time. And just to say to people that these writer workshops, the next one, it's the 30th of April. Just keep an eye on social media, or you can contact me. I'll be putting up over the next few days the registration details. And that one is about the art of storytelling. It's a book, a guy who's an advertising guy, but you know, he breaks down. Somebody actually wrote about the nuts and bolts of writing, and he just breaks down kind of the classic writing, the classic story. And so I think we'd be really interested in that one. So I'd recommend that for people. So thanks so much, Trevis, and thanks so much, Emma, and everybody. Please, I would encourage people to get writing. So take care. Enjoy the rest of the light is still there, so there's still time for a little walk. So take care,
Thanks so
everybody.
very much, Virgo.
Cheers.
Thanks so
Take
much,
care.
Virgo.
Bye. Take
And to all
care.
of
Bye,
you. Cheers.
Trevis.